He looked at her with eyes like shattered glass and whispered the words that would haunt her for 3 years. "I will marry you, Iris. I will give you my name, my home, and my protection. But do not ever ask for my heart. It is buried in a grave 6 feet deep, and I have sworn never to resurrect it." They called Sebastian Vane the Ice Duke of Cumberland. He needed her fortune to save his legacy. She needed his title to save her family's reputation. It was supposed to be a business arrangement, a cold contract signed in ink and sealed with a loveless vow. But what happens when the woman you swore to ignore becomes the only fire warm enough to melt the ice? And what happens when the secrets of his past wife's death come back to destroy them both? This is the story of a hate that burned, a love that bled, and the woman who broke the coldest vow. The year was 1889, and the London sky was the colour of a bruised plum. Rain lashed against the windows of the Blackwell estate, mimicking the storm brewing inside the library. Iris Blackwell sat in a high-backed velvet chair, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. She was 22 years old, possessing a quiet beauty that was often overlooked, dark curls that refused to be tamed, and eyes the colour of warm amber. But tonight, she felt like nothing more than a piece of inventory in her father's ledger. Across the mahogany desk sat 2 men. One was her father, Thomas Blackwell, a man who had made a fortune in shipping, but lacked the one thing money couldn't buy: blue blood. The other man was Sebastian Vane, the Duke of Cumberland. Sebastian was terrifying. There was no other word for it. He was tall, with broad shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of the world. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was devastatingly handsome, but entirely devoid of warmth. He did not look at Iris. He looked at the contract in front of him as if it were a death warrant. "The dowry is substantial, Your Grace," Thomas said, his voice trembling slightly. £50,000 upon the signing, and another 50,000 upon the birth of an heir. It is enough to restore Cumberland Manor to its former glory. Sebastian didn't blink. He picked up the quill, the feather trembling slightly in the drafty room. "And in return, your daughter becomes a duchess. She gains entry to circles that would otherwise slam the door in her face." "It is a fair trade," Thomas insisted. Finally, Sebastian turned his head. His gaze collided with Iris's, and she felt a physical chill sweep through the room. His eyes were grey, not the soft grey of a dawn sky, but the hard steel grey of a winter storm. "Miss Blackwell," Sebastian said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in the silence. "Do you understand the terms?" "I understand that my father is buying a title and you are selling one," Iris replied, her voice surprisingly steady. Thomas gasped. "Iris, watch your tongue." Sebastian's lip curled slightly. Not a smile, but a flicker of interest. "She is blunt. That is better than the simpering dishonesty I am used to." He stood up, towering over the desk. "But I have a condition that is not written in ink." He walked around the desk and stopped in front of her. He smelled of rain, tobacco, and old leather. "I am a widower, Miss Blackwell. My heart died 3 years ago with my first wife, Caroline. I am marrying you because I have tenants who will starve if I do not repair the estate, and a roof that is collapsing. I will be a faithful husband. I will never mistreat you. But you must know this." He leaned down, his face inches from hers. She could see the tension in his jaw. "I swore a vow over Caroline's casket that I would never love again. Do not try to change me. Do not try to fix me. We will live separate lives under the same roof. If you look for affection, you will find only a ghost. Do you accept?" Iris looked at her father, who was practically sweating with anxiety. She knew the rumors. The Blackwells were new money. They were ridiculed by high society. This marriage would secure her family's future for generations. She looked back at the Duke. She saw the pain behind the ice, but she also saw the impenetrable wall he had built. "I accept," she whispered. He signed the paper without hesitation. The scratch of the quill sounded like a knife tearing through fabric. The wedding, 2 weeks later, was a somber affair. There were no flowers, only greenery. The guests whispered behind their fans. They called Iris the merchant's daughter, and Sebastian the widower who sold his soul. At the altar, when the priest asked Sebastian to kiss his bride, he leaned in and pressed his lips to her forehead. It was cold, brief, and entirely impersonal. That night, in the grand townhouse in London, Iris sat on the edge of the bed in her nightgown, shivering. The door opened. Sebastian stood there, still in his formal wear. "My valet has moved my things to the adjoining suite," he said, not stepping into the room. "You will have your privacy. Good night, Duchess." He closed the door. The click of the latch sounded like the closing of a prison cell. Iris lay back on the cold sheets and let the first tear fall. She was now one of the highest-ranking women in England, and she had never felt more alone. The journey to Cumberland Manor took 2 days. As the carriage rolled north, the landscape changed from the bustling streets of London to the wild, untamed moors of Northumberland. The sky here seemed lower, heavier. Sebastian rode his horse alongside the carriage for the entire journey, refusing to sit inside with Iris. When they finally passed through the iron gates of the estate, Iris understood why he needed her money. Cumberland Manor was magnificent in size, a sprawling Gothic stone beast sitting atop a cliff overlooking the churning sea. But it was also decaying. Ivy choked the stone walls, several windows were boarded up, and the gardens were overgrown with thorns. They were greeted in the main hall by the staff. A line of servants stood rigid, their faces unreadable. At the head of the line was a woman in a severe black dress, her grey hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her eyes. "Welcome home, Your Grace," the woman said, ignoring Iris completely. "Mrs. Sterling," Sebastian nodded. "This is the new Duchess." Mrs. Sterling turned her gaze to Iris. Her eyes were dark beads of malice. "We have prepared the east wing for the mistress, although that was Caroline's wing." "Put her in the west wing," Sebastian said abruptly, handing his coat to a footman. "The east wing is to remain shut." "But Your Grace," Mrs. Sterling protested, her voice dripping with false concern. "The west wing is draughty in the winter, and the furnishings are old." "Do as I say," Sebastian snapped. He turned to Iris. "Dinner is at 7. Do not be late." He strode up the grand staircase, the sound of his boots echoing off the marble floors, leaving Iris standing alone, with a staff that clearly despised her. Iris was shown to her room in the west wing. It was freezing. The fireplace was empty, and the velvet curtains were moth-eaten. When she asked a young maid to light a fire, the girl looked nervously at Mrs. Sterling, who was hovering in the doorway. "We are low on coal, Your Grace," Mrs. Sterling lied smoothly. "We must conserve it for the Duke's study and the main hall." "I am the Duchess," Iris said, her voice firm despite her fear. "And I am freezing. Bring coal immediately." Mrs. Sterling smirked. "As you wish. Though I must say, the former Duchess, God rest her soul, never complained. She was a woman of hearty stock, a true lady." The comparison had begun. Over the next few weeks, Iris realized she wasn't just living with a cold husband. She was living with a ghost. Caroline was everywhere. Her portrait hung in the main hall, a blonde, blue-eyed beauty with an angelic smile. The servants spoke of her in hushed, reverent tones. Caroline loved this garden. Caroline organized the best balls. Caroline was an angel. Iris, by contrast, was the intruder, the merchant's daughter. Sebastian was rarely seen. He spent his days riding the estate, managing the repairs that Iris's dowry was paying for. He ate dinner with her in silence, reading correspondence while she picked at her food. One rainy Tuesday, Iris decided she could no longer stand the isolation. She wandered into the library, hoping to find a book to distract her. She didn't realize Sebastian was there, sitting in a wing-back chair by the fire, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He stared into the flames, looking more exhausted than she had ever seen him. "I didn't mean to intrude," Iris said softly. Sebastian jumped, spilling a drop of amber liquid on his hand. He looked at her, his eyes slightly glazed. "You live here, Iris. You cannot intrude in your own house." It was the first time he had used her name since the wedding. Iris took a step closer. "You look tired, Sebastian." "I am tired," he admitted, his guard lowered by the alcohol. "The roof in the tenant quarters collapsed today. A child was injured. I have the money now to fix it, thanks to you. But it takes time." "Can I help?" Iris asked. "My father taught me accounting. I could help you manage the ledgers, organize the supplies." Sebastian laughed, a harsh, dry sound. You are a lady of leisure now. Go embroider something." "I am a merchant's daughter," Iris shot back, anger flaring. "I know the price of lumber and the cost of labor better than you do, apparently. You are drowning in work, Sebastian, and you are too proud to grab the lifeline I am throwing you." Sebastian stood up slowly. The air in the room shifted. He walked toward her, stopping just a foot away. He looked down at her, searching her face. For a second, the ice in his eyes seemed to crack. He looked at her mouth, and Iris's breath hitched. "Why do you stay?" he whispered. "Why do you not run back to London and spend my money on dresses?" "Because I made a vow, too," Iris said, holding his gaze. "And unlike you, I intend to put some life into it." The tension was palpable. For a moment, it seemed he might kiss her. He leaned in, his hand twitching at his side, as if he wanted to reach out and touch her hair. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the library creaked open. Mrs. Sterling stood there, holding a silver tray. "Your Grace," she said, her voice cutting through the moment like a blade. "A letter has arrived. From Genevieve." The effect on Sebastian was instant. The warmth evaporated. He stepped back from Iris as if he had been burned. His face hardened into that familiar stone mask. "Leave us!" he barked at Iris. "Sebastian?" Iris asked, confused by the sudden shift. "I said, get out!" he roared, snatching the letter from Mrs. Sterling's tray. Iris fled the room, her heart pounding. She ran up the stairs to the West Wing, tears stinging her eyes. She didn't understand. Who was Genevieve? And why did her name hold so much power over him? Later that night, unable to sleep, Iris crept down the hallway. She heard voices coming from Mrs. Sterling's room near the kitchen. "She is getting too comfortable," Mrs. Sterling's voice hissed. "He almost touched her today." "He will never love her," another voice replied. A man's voice, perhaps the stable master. "He is too broken." "We must ensure it stays that way," Mrs. Sterling said. "If he moves on from Caroline, he might start looking into the accounts. He might realize where the money was actually going before she died. We need to remind him of his grief. Tomorrow is the anniversary." Iris froze in the shadows. The accounts? Where the money was going. She realized then that the coldness in Cumberland Manor wasn't just about grief. There was something rotting beneath the floorboards, something dangerous, and she was the only one who could see it. The morning of the 3rd anniversary of Caroline's death arrived with a suffocating fog that rolled off the ocean, swallowing Cumberland Manor whole. The house was silent, but it was a loud silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums. Iris woke to find the house draped in black crepe. The mirrors were covered. The staff moved like wraiths, speaking only in whispers. When Iris descended for breakfast, she found the table set for one. "The Duke will not be dining," Mrs. Sterling said, appearing from the shadows like a bad omen. She was holding a bundle of white lilies. "He is at the crypt. He spends the entire day there. He is not to be disturbed by anyone, especially not strangers." The word hung in the air, a deliberate insult. "I am his wife, Mrs. Sterling," Iris said, smoothing the skirt of her deep blue day dress. "Not a stranger." "A piece of paper does not make a wife," Mrs. Sterling replied with a sneer, dropping her professional facade entirely. "He loved her. He worships the ground she lies in. You are merely the bank account that keeps the lights on." Iris felt the sting of tears but refused to let them fall. She remembered the conversation she had overheard the night before. The accounts. Someone was stealing. "If I am the bank account," Iris said, her voice icy, "then I suggest you treat me with the respect due to the person who pays your wages. Now, move aside. I am going to the library." Mrs. Sterling's eyes narrowed, but she stepped back. As Iris walked past, she noticed the housekeeper's hands were trembling. Fear. Mrs. Sterling was afraid of Iris looking too closely at the household management. Instead of going to the crypt to comfort a husband who didn't want her, Iris went to war. She entered the library and locked the heavy door behind her. If Sebastian was occupied with the dead, she would investigate the living. She climbed the ladder to the highest shelf, where the dusty, older ledgers were kept, the ones from 3 years ago before Caroline died. She pulled them down, sneezing as a cloud of dust erupted. For 5 hours, Iris pored over the numbers. Her father had taught her that numbers were the only language that couldn't lie. People lied, ledgers didn't. It didn't take long to find the bleeding wound in the estate's finances. 3 years ago, the estate was profitable. But every month, large sums, hundreds of pounds, were withdrawn under the label charitable donations. These payments were authorized by Caroline. Iris frowned. She traced the entries. The money wasn't going to the church or the orphanage. The checks were endorsed to a Dr. Lysander Thorn in London. Thorn. The name sent a shiver down her spine. Why was the Duchess paying a doctor in London half the estate's income? And why did the payments stop exactly on the day she died? "What were you hiding, Caroline?" Iris whispered to the empty room. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass echoed from the hallway. Iris slammed the ledger shut, hid it behind a row of encyclopedias, and unlocked the door. She ran toward the noise. In the main foyer, Sebastian was standing amidst the wreckage of a vase. He was soaking wet, his clothes muddy from kneeling in the graveyard, and he reeked of brandy. He was swaying, his eyes wild and unseeing. "She's gone!" he slurred, shouting at the empty air. "Why is it still so cold?" Mrs. Sterling rushed forward, her face a mask of exaggerated pity. "Oh, Your Grace, you are in a state. Come, let me help you to bed. The grief is too much." She reached for him, but Sebastian flinched. "Sebastian," Iris said, stepping forward. Her voice was calm, contrasting with the chaos. Sebastian turned his head. For a moment, he didn't seem to know who she was. Then, recognition dawned, bringing with it a wave of misplaced anger. "You!" he spat. "What are you doing here? Why are you wearing blue?" She hated blue. "I am not her," Iris said softly. walking toward him despite the danger radiating off him. "I am Iris, and you are bleeding." She pointed to his hand, cut by the glass. "Leave me alone," he roared, the sound bouncing off the stone walls. "I don't want your pity! I don't want your money! I want my wife!" The staff watched, holding their breath. This was the moment the new Duchess was supposed to crumble. Instead, Iris walked right up to him. She took his bleeding hand in hers. He tried to pull away, but she held on with surprising strength. "You can scream at me all you want, Sebastian," she said, looking up into his storm-grey eyes. "You can hate me for breathing while she is dead. But I am the only one in this house who is actually looking at you, not the ghost of who you were." Sebastian froze. The rage seemed to drain out of him, leaving only exhaustion. He looked down at her hand, holding his, her warm, living skin against his cold, muddy fingers. I can't breathe," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I know," Iris said. "Come with me." She didn't take him to the master suite. She led him to the kitchen, dismissing the gaping servants with a sharp wave of her hand. She sat the Duke of Cumberland down on a wooden stool, boiled water, and cleaned his hand herself. She didn't speak. She just washed the mud and blood away, bandaged the cut, and made him drink strong tea. For the first time in 3 years, Sebastian Vane sat in silence with a woman and didn't feel the need to perform his grief. He just felt quiet. "Why are you kind to me?" he asked, his voice raspy, staring at his bandaged hand. "I have been nothing but a monster to you." "Because," Iris said, turning away to hide the emotion in her eyes, "I know what it's like to be lonely in a room full of people." She left him there, sitting by the warmth of the stove. She had survived the anniversary. But as she walked back to her room, she knew the real storm was just beginning. The name Lysander Thorn burned in her mind. She had to find out who he was and why Mrs. Sterling was so terrified of the past being uncovered. 2 days after the anniversary, the letter from Genevieve arrived. This time, it wasn't just a letter. A carriage arrived at midday, a flashy, expensive thing with gold trim that looked out of place against the rugged grey stone of the manor. Iris was in the garden, wearing gardening gloves and pruning the overgrown rose bushes herself, much to the horror of the gardener. She stood up as a woman descended from the carriage. She was stunning. That was the first thing Iris noticed. She had hair the colour of spun gold, eyes of piercing violet, and a figure that her travelling dress was tailored to accentuate perfectly. She looked like a porcelain doll that had come to life. Sebastian came out of the front door, buttoning his coat. He stopped dead in his tracks. "Genevieve?" he breathed. The woman ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. Sebastian hesitated for a split second, then hugged her back, a hug far warmer than anything he had ever offered Iris. "Oh, Sebastian," Genevieve cried, pulling back to cup his face. "I couldn't stay away any longer. I dreamt of Caroline. She told me you were suffering." Iris walked up the path, pulling off her dirty gloves. She felt small, brown, and plain next to this golden creature. "Introduce us, Sebastian," Iris said, her voice clipped. Sebastian pulled away from Genevieve, looking guilty. "Iris, this is Genevieve Cross. She was Caroline's cousin, and her closest friend." Genevieve turned to Iris. Her violet eyes swept over Iris's messy hair and dirt-stained dress. A small, pitying smile touched her lips. "Oh, you must be the new wife," Genevieve said. "The merchant's daughter. Caroline wrote to me about your father's business. How industrious." It was a polite way of calling her common. "Welcome to Cumberland Manor, Miss Cross," Iris said, standing tall. "I assume you are staying?" "Naturally," Genevieve said, linking her arm through Sebastian's. Sebastian needs his family, and I have so many memories to share with him. We have much to discuss. The next week was a torture designed specifically for Iris. Genevieve took over the house. She moved into the East Wing, the forbidden wing, claiming she needed to be close to Caroline's spirit. Sebastian didn't stop her. She ordered the cook to make Sebastian's favorite meals from years ago. She played the piano in the evenings, playing songs that Caroline used to sing. She was dragging Sebastian back into the past, just as he had started to step toward the present. Iris watched it all. She saw how Mrs. Sterling fawned over Genevieve. She saw the whispered conversations between the two women in the corridors. They are allies, Iris realized. Genevieve is here to ensure I never gain influence over Sebastian. The breaking point came at dinner on Friday. Genevieve had accidentally spilled wine on the tablecloth and laughed about it, retelling a story of a trip to Paris she, Caroline, and Sebastian had taken. "Do you remember, Sebastian?" Genevieve laughed, touching his hand on the table. "We danced until dawn. You said you were the happiest man alive. You said you would never look at another woman as long as you lived." She paused, glancing meaningfully at Iris. "It must be so hard for you," Genevieve sighed, turning her false sympathy on Iris. "To know you are merely a necessity, a financial arrangement. Sebastian is too polite to say it, but we all know he is only enduring this marriage." Sebastian stared at his plate, his jaw tight. He didn't speak. He didn't defend her. Iris set her fork down. The clink against the china silenced the room. "Is that what you think, Miss Cross?" Iris asked quietly. "It is the truth, isn't it?" Genevieve smiled sweetly. "You bought a title. He sold one. It is a transaction. There is no shame in it, I suppose. But let us not pretend there is affection." Iris stood up. "You are right. It was a transaction. My money saved this roof from collapsing on your head. My money paid for the food you are currently eating. And my money is currently fixing the tenant houses so children don't freeze to death." She turned to Sebastian. "I have endured the coldness, Sebastian. I have endured the ghost of your wife. But I will not sit at my own table and be insulted by a guest who contributes nothing but poison." "Iris," Sebastian started, looking up. "No," Iris cut him off. "You have a choice tonight, Sebastian. You can stay here in the past with Genevieve and the ghost of a woman who is never coming back, or you can come to the present, where you have a wife who is fighting for your future. But I am done begging for scraps." She turned and walked out of the dining room. She expected silence. She expected him to stay seated. But as she reached the hallway, she heard the scrape of a chair being pushed back violently. "Genevieve," Sebastian's voice rang out, low and dangerous. "You will apologize." Iris stopped, her heart hammering against her ribs. She turned around. Sebastian was standing, looming over the beautiful blonde woman. Genevieve looked shocked. "Sebastian?" she gasped. "I was only speaking the truth, for Caroline." "Do not use her name to justify your cruelty," Sebastian growled. "Iris is my wife. She is the Duchess of Cumberland, and you are a guest in her home. If you cannot show her respect, then you will leave. Tonight." You are choosing her," Genevieve whispered, her face twisting into something ugly. "Over us? Over the memory of Caroline?" "I am choosing to live," Sebastian said. He looked toward the doorway, his eyes locking with Iris's. The ice was gone. In its place was something fierce, desperate, and undeniably hot. He walked away from the table, leaving Genevieve stunned, and strode toward Iris. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of her. "You were right," he said, his voice rough. "I have been a coward." He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and brushed a stray curl from her forehead. His fingers grazed her skin, and the contact sent a shockwave through her. "I don't know if I can give you my heart yet, Iris," he whispered. "It is still in pieces. But I swear to you, no one will ever disrespect you again. Not even me." Iris let out a breath she felt she had been holding for months. "That is a start, Sebastian." He offered her his arm. "Walk with me. I want to show you the plans for the tenant cottages. I believe you had some ideas about the costs." As they walked away, arm in arm, Iris felt a triumph unlike any other. But she didn't see the look on Genevieve's face as they left. It wasn't just jealousy. It was panic. Genevieve turned to Mrs. Sterling, who was lurking in the shadows. "He is slipping away," Genevieve hissed. "If he falls in love with her, he will stop mourning. If he stops mourning, he will find out about the baby." Mrs. Sterling nodded grimly. "Then we must play our final card. We must destroy her reputation before she destroys our secret." For 3 weeks, Cumberland Manor experienced a false spring. It was not just the weather, which had turned unseasonably mild, melting the frost on the moors. It was the atmosphere inside the house. Since the night Sebastian had defended Iris against Genevieve, the dynamic had shifted. Sebastian no longer took his meals in silence. He asked Iris for her opinion on the estate management. He walked with her in the gardens. He was still a man carrying a heavy burden, but he was sharing the weight. One evening, they were in the library, the fire crackling warmly. Iris was reviewing the architectural plans for the new tenant cottages, while Sebastian read a newspaper. "You have a smudge of ink on your cheek," Sebastian said, his voice low. Iris looked up, startled. "Do I?" She rubbed her cheek, but missed the spot. "Here," Sebastian said. He leaned forward, taking a handkerchief from his pocket. He gently wiped the ink from her skin. He didn't pull away immediately. His hand lingered near her jaw. "You work too hard, Iris. You have saved this estate in months, a task I failed to do in years." "You were grieving," Iris whispered, her heart pounding against her ribs. "I was drowning," he corrected. "You pulled me to shore." He leaned in. Iris closed her eyes. His lips brushed hers, tentative, soft, and terrified. It wasn't a passionate, ravaging kiss. It was a question. "Is this allowed? Can I have this?" When he pulled back, his eyes were dark. "Iris," he breathed. "Your Grace!" The library door flew open. It was Mrs. Sterling, looking flushed and breathless, though her eyes were sharp as flint. Sebastian jerked back, the moment shattered. "What is it, Mrs. Sterling? I told you we were not to be disturbed." "My apologies," the housekeeper said, bowing stiffly. "But there is a situation in the kitchen. A pipe has burst." It was a lie. Iris knew it was a lie. She could see the triumph in Mrs. Sterling's eyes as she looked at the distance she had successfully put between the husband and wife. "I will handle it," Sebastian said, standing up and buttoning his jacket, the mask of the Duke sliding back into place. He looked at Iris, a flicker of regret in his eyes. "We will finish this conversation later." But they wouldn't, because Iris had found what she needed. Earlier that day, while searching for a fresh quill in Sebastian's old correspondence drawer, she had found a crumpled receipt from 3 years ago. It was from a Dr. Lysander Thorne, with an address in the dark, industrial heart of East London, 14 Rookery Lane, Whitechapel. The next morning, Iris announced she was going to London to visit her father. "I will come with you," Sebastian offered immediately over breakfast. "No," Iris said, perhaps too quickly. She saw Genevieve perk up across the table. "You must oversee the cottage repairs. The builders need your authorization. I will only be gone 2 days." Sebastian looked disappointed, suspicion clouding his grey eyes. "As you wish." Genevieve smirked into her teacup. "Do give my regards to the city, Iris. It must be so boring for you here, tucked away with us country folk. I'm sure you miss the excitement of your former life." The implication was clear. You are going to meet a lover. Iris ignored her and left. But as her carriage rolled away, she didn't go to her father's opulent townhouse. She directed the driver to Whitechapel. Rookery Lane was a place where hope went to die. The streets were slick with grime, and the air smelled of coal smoke and gin. Dr. Thorne's practice was a narrow, leaning building with blacked-out windows. Iris told her driver to wait and tightened her grip on her parasol. She knocked. The door was opened by a man who looked more like a butcher than a doctor. He was large, with a red face and hands that looked too thick to hold a scalpel. "We're closed," he grunted. "I am the Duchess of Cumberland," Iris said, projecting every ounce of authority she possessed. "And I believe you knew the former Duchess, Caroline Vane." The man's face went pale. He ushered her in quickly and bolted the door. The office was chaotic, filled with strange jars and piles of paper. Dr. Thorne poured himself a drink, his hands shaking. "I haven't heard that name in 3 years," Thorne said. "I thought the payments stopped because she was dead." "They stopped because she died," Iris said, standing in the center of the room, refusing to sit on the filthy chairs. "But I know she paid you thousands of pounds. Why? Was she ill?" Thorne laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Ill? No, she was healthy as a horse. She was paying me for silence." "Silence about what?" Thorne looked at Iris with greedy eyes. "That depends. Is the current Duke paying as well? Because my silence is expensive." Iris slammed a small bag of coins onto the table. It was her own money, saved from her allowance. "Talk." Thorne weighed the bag, then smirked. "She wasn't sick, Your Grace. She was pregnant." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Pregnant? But Sebastian said they had been trying for an heir. Why would she hide a pregnancy from her husband? He would have been overjoyed. "Because," Thorne leaned in, his breath smelling of onions. The timeline didn't match. The Duke was away in Prussia for 4 months on diplomatic business. When he came back, she was 3 months along. She came to me to get rid of it. Iris felt sick. She wanted to terminate the pregnancy. No. Thorne shook his head. She was too far along when she came to me. She wanted to hide it. She paid me to fake a diagnosis of nervous hysteria so she could go into confinement at my private clinic here in London. She told the Duke she was coming to the city for rest cures. She stayed here for 5 months. "And the baby?" Iris whispered. "What happened to the baby?" "She gave birth to a boy," Thorne said. "Healthy. Strong lungs." "Where is he?" "She took him," Thorne shrugged. 2 days after the birth, she took the child and left. Said she had a cousin who would handle it. Said the Duke could never know he was raising a bastard. She went back to Cumberland Manor, claiming she was cured. Then, a week later, I heard she died. Iris leaned against the wall for support. Genevieve. The cousin who would handle it. It all made sense. Caroline had an affair while Sebastian was away. She became pregnant. She hid the birth with Genevieve's help. But then she died. Perhaps from complications. Perhaps from guilt. And Genevieve knew. "One more thing," Thorne said, counting his coins. "The cousin, the blonde one. She came here a month ago." Iris froze. Genevieve was here. "Aye. She wanted the records destroyed. I told her I'd do it for a price. She said she'd get the money from the estate." Iris turned and ran out of the shop. Genevieve wasn't just a jealous friend. She was a blackmailer. She was likely bleeding the estate dry to pay Thorn, or worse, she was keeping the illegitimate child somewhere as leverage. Iris had to get back to Sebastian. She had to tell him the truth, that the saintly wife he mourned was a liar, and that his grief had been manufactured by the very people claiming to protect him. But as Iris's carriage raced north, back toward the moody skies of Cumberland, she didn't realize that Genevieve had anticipated this move. The trap at the manor had already been set, and it was going to snap shut the moment Iris walked through the door. The journey back was grueling. A storm had washed out one of the bridges, forcing a detour that added 10 hours to the trip. By the time Iris arrived at Cumberland Manor, it was late evening on the third day. The house was ablaze with light. Carriages lined the driveway. Iris stumbled out of her carriage, her dress wrinkled from travel, her hair a mess. "What is happening?" she asked the footman. "The Duke is hosting the autumn assembly, Your Grace," the footman said, avoiding her eyes. "Miss Cross organized it in your absence." A party. Genevieve had thrown a party while Iris was gone, knowing Iris would return exhausted and unprepared. Iris walked into the great hall. The music stopped. 50 pairs of eyes turned to look at her. The local gentry, the neighbors who had always looked down on the merchant's daughter, stared in shock. And there, in the center of the room, stood Sebastian. He looked magnificent in formal black tie, but his face was like granite. Next to him stood Genevieve, wearing a dress of shimmering silver that looked suspiciously like a wedding gown. "You decided to join us," Sebastian said. His voice carried across the silent room. It was cold, colder than the day they met. "Sebastian," Iris said, stepping forward, ignoring the whispers of the crowd. "I need to speak with you, urgently. Alone." "I think we are done with secrets, Iris," Sebastian said. He held up a hand. In it, he clutched a sheaf of papers. "I found these in your desk," he said. Iris frowned. "My desk? I have nothing to hide." "Don't you?" Sebastian threw the papers onto the floor at her feet. They scattered across the marble. Iris looked down. They were letters. Handwriting that looked identical to hers. Addressed to a man named David. "My dearest David, the old fool suspects nothing. I have access to the accounts now. I will siphon the money as we planned. Once I have enough, I will leave this dreary castle and this frozen husband, and we can finally be together in Paris. Yours, Iris." Iris gasped. This is a forgery. I don't know anyone named David." "Don't lie." Genevieve stepped forward, her voice trembling with fake outrage. "I saw you mailing the letters, Iris. I tried to protect you. I tried to tell you to stop. But when you went to London, I knew you were going to him." "You went to London to see your father," Sebastian said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "But I telegraphed your father yesterday to ask if you had arrived safely. He replied that he had not seen you in months." The crowd gasped. "Where were you, Iris?" Sebastian demanded. "If not with your father, and not with this lover. Where were you?" Iris opened her mouth. "I was in Whitechapel, meeting the doctor who delivered your dead wife's bastard child." She couldn't say it. Not here. Not in front of 50 people. It would destroy Sebastian. It would humiliate him publicly, destroying the legacy he fought so hard to protect. Caroline was his saint. If Iris revealed the truth now, she would look like a monster, trying to smear a dead woman to save her own skin. "I cannot tell you here," Iris whispered. "Please, Sebastian, trust me." "Trust you?" Sebastian laughed, a broken, terrible sound. "I trusted Caroline, and she died. I started to trust you, and you are robbing me." Mrs. Sterling stepped out from the crowd. "Your Grace, if I may, I also found this in her travel bag." She held up the bag of coins Iris had taken to London, or rather, a similar bag, and a ledger. "She has been paying a doctor in London," Mrs. Sterling said. "Dr. Thorne. We suspect, well, it is common for women who have indiscretions to need a doctor's help." The accusation hung in the air. They were implying Iris was pregnant by another man and seeking an abortion or seeking treatment for venereal disease. It was the ultimate disgrace. Iris looked at Sebastian. She saw the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to believe her. She could see the desperate hope that she would have an alibi. "Sebastian," she said, her voice ringing clear and true. "Look at me, not at them. Look at me. Have I ever asked you for money? Have I ever lied to you about who I am?" "You lied about where you went," he said hoarsely. "To find the truth," Iris cried. "About her, about Caroline." The room went deadly silent. Sebastian's face shut down. The gate closed. "Do not speak her name." "She is the one who paid Thorne," Iris shouted, desperate now. "She is the one who had secrets. Genevieve is lying to you." "Enough!" Sebastian roared. He turned his back on her. The rejection was absolute. "You are my wife," Sebastian said to the wall, unable to look at her. "So I cannot cast you out without causing a scandal that would ruin this family forever. You will remain at Cumberland Manor, but you will live in the gatehouse. You will not step foot in this house again. You will not speak to me. You will not speak to my staff." "Sebastian, please, get her out of my sight," he ordered the guards. 2 footmen grabbed Iris by the arms. She didn't fight them. She looked at Genevieve. Genevieve was smiling. It was a small, victorious smile. She leaned into Sebastian, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "I am so sorry, Sebastian," she cooed. "I am here. I will never leave you." Iris was dragged out of the warmth of the great hall and into the cold, rainy night. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her, with a sound like a coffin lid closing. She was thrown into the gatehouse, a small, damp stone cottage at the edge of the estate. She had no servants, no fire, and no friends. She sat on the dusty floor, listening to the rain. She had lost everything: her reputation, her home, and the man she had foolishly fallen in love with. But as the dawn broke, grey and bleak, Iris Blackwell stood up. She wiped the tears from her face. They thought they had broken her. They thought she was just a merchant's daughter who would fade away into shame. But they had forgotten one thing. Merchants know how to negotiate, and they know that when someone cheats you, you don't walk away. You burn their business to the ground. Iris reached into her corset. There, hidden against her skin, was a piece of paper she had taken from Thorne's office when he wasn't looking. It wasn't a receipt. It was an address. The orphanage of St. Jude, Yorkshire. That was where the child was. "You want a war, Genevieve?" Iris whispered to the empty room. "I will give you a war." Christmas Eve arrived, wrapping Cumberland Manor in a shroud of white snow. Inside, the great hall glittered with false cheer. Genevieve, draped in the late Caroline's diamonds, raised a glass to a new beginning, acting every bit the Duchess she longed to be. Sebastian stood beside her, a hollow man, his eyes lifeless. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors banged open. A freezing gust extinguished the candles, silencing the room. Iris stood in the threshold. She wore a rough wool cloak, her face gaunt from travel, but her eyes burned with a terrifying fire. Clinging to her hand was a shivering 3-year-old boy. "Guards!" Genevieve shrieked. "Remove this thief!" "I am no thief," Iris's voice rang out, cutting through the panic. She marched forward, the crowd parting like water, until she stood before Sebastian. I went to Yorkshire, Sebastian, to the orphanage of St. Jude. She pushed the boy forward. This is Leo. Dr. Thorne delivered him 3 years ago in London. Sebastian frowned, looking at the child. I don't understand. Look at his neck, Iris commanded. Sebastian knelt. There, on the boy's skin, was a star-shaped birthmark. The cross-family mark, Iris declared. Genevieve has one. And so did Caroline. The room gasped. Genevieve stumbled back, her face draining of colour. Caroline didn't die of fever, Iris revealed, tears finally spilling. She died of infection after hiding a pregnancy. You were in Prussia, Sebastian. She had a lover. She paid Thorne for silence, and she paid Genevieve to hide the child. Iris slammed a bundle of letters against Sebastian's chest. Read them. Read how your friend blackmailed your dead wife and left her own nephew to rot in an orphanage. Sebastian read the first letter. His hands shook. The truth hit him like a physical blow. He had mourned a lie for 3 years while punishing the only woman who fought for him. "Get out," Sebastian whispered to Genevieve. Then he roared, "Get out before I kill you!" Genevieve fled into the snow, her reign of terror over. Sebastian turned to Iris, who was swaying with exhaustion. "You cleared your name," she whispered. "I will go now." "No!" Sebastian caught her as she fell, pulling her tightly against his chest in front of everyone. "I was a blind fool. I worshipped a ghost and froze out the only warmth in my life." He framed her face in his hands. "I swore never to love again. But you, Iris, you broke that vow. I love you. Please, stay." Iris smiled through her tears. "Only if we banish the ghosts, Sebastian." "Done," he promised, kissing her deeply as the crowd erupted. Years later, the manor was warm and full of laughter. Sebastian sat in the garden with Iris, their daughter, and Leo, whom they raised as their own. The Ice Duke was gone, replaced by a man who finally understood that the only way to survive the winter is to let yourself burn. And so, the ice finally melted at Cumberland Manor. Sebastian learned the hardest lesson of all, that true love isn't about preserving a memory, but about fighting for the person standing right in front of you. Iris didn't just save the estate, she saved his soul. I hope you enjoyed this story of betrayal, redemption, and a love that defied the odds. If this story moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Iris? Would you have forgiven Sebastian, or would you have walked away after clearing your name? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more dramatic stories, historical romances, and twisted tales of karma, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.